Chicago, 1994. Long before the royal titles, flashing cameras, and global fame, Meghan Markle was just another young woman chasing a dream, and standing beside her was Joe Giuliano. Not a prince, not a celebrity, but the man she quietly married before the world even knew her name. What began as an intense teenage romance soon turned into one of the most quietly erased stories in celebrity history. Those close to Joe's family say what they saw behind closed doors was enough to make them step in, and to make sure the world would never hear about it. According to insiders, the Giulianos were stunned by Meghan's hunger for status, her cool determination, and her ability to charm and control those closest to her. The family, deeply traditional and protective of their own, turned their backs on her completely. Before the marriage even found its footing, it was finished. The paperwork was sealed, the Giulianos vanished from sight, and Meghan moved on as if Joe Giuliano had never existed. But after nearly 30 years of silence, quiet voices are starting to speak, and they're revealing a side of Meghan the world was never meant to see. Before the crowns, before Hollywood, before the world even recognized her face, there was another Meghan. A young woman standing quietly inside a small Las Vegas chapel beside a man named Joe Giuliano. No paparazzi, no red carpets, no witnesses. Just two people exchanging vows that would later fade from every record that could have proven they ever existed. Those close to the Giuliano family insist it wasn't just gossip or imagination. It happened, a private ceremony that dissolved as quietly as it began. Within months, the paperwork was filed, sealed, and buried deep where no one would ever find it. But one question never stopped echoing. If it was just a harmless young marriage, why did it need to disappear? Why the secrecy, the legal silence, the vanishing of every trace? People who knew Joe at the time described him as respectful, grounded, and family-centered, the kind of man who never sought attention or fame. His world was small, steady, and guided by tradition. And that's what made what followed so startling. Because the woman he brought home wasn't just another young bride. She was already building something much bigger. Joe's family, known for their tight bonds and quiet morals, noticed the cracks early. Details that didn't align, timelines that shifted, stories that changed depending on who was listening. One family acquaintance recalled Joe's mother growing uneasy when Meghan mentioned a graduation year that didn't match the school records. She claimed she'd finished in '94, the source said, but the official records and even her classmates told another story. At first, they brushed it off as a simple mix-up, but the deeper they looked, the more puzzling it became. Some documents hinted she might have been older than she claimed, possibly born in the late 1970s, not in 1981, as her public profile later stated. If true, that would mean she wasn't the innocent young woman she pretended to be when she met Joe. She was older, strategic, and experienced. To Joe's parents, that changed everything. The charming woman their son fell for suddenly felt unfamiliar, like someone playing a part. Someone who could meet your gaze and make you believe every word, even when the math didn't add up. "We couldn't trust her," said one insider. Not because of what she said, but because she was too good at saying it. Behind her polished smile, they saw calculation. Behind her charm, they sensed control. And in that quiet Chicago home, whispers began. Whispers that would soon harden into the Giuliano family's silent truth. Meghan Markle wasn't the person she appeared to be. And to understand why the Giulianos turned away from her, you first have to understand who they were. They weren't rich or famous, not politicians or public figures. The Giulianos were a deeply traditional Italian-American family built on faith, loyalty, and privacy. Their lives followed rules that never bent. You marry once, you protect your name, and you keep your family matters behind closed doors. Every Sunday, they gathered around the same dinner table, passing food, stories, and prayers. On Fridays, they bowed their heads together before a meal. For them, reputation wasn't about appearances. It was about character, about the way you carried yourself when no one was watching. Then Meghan entered their world, bringing something they'd never encountered before: ambition. She talked about auditions in Los Angeles, about being seen, about chasing a future filled with lights and attention. At first, the Giulianos brushed it off as youthful excitement, a phase that would pass. But soon it became clear it wasn't just a dream, it was a plan. She didn't talk about family, one close friend recalled. She talked about opportunity. Joe's parents began to worry. They saw a woman with eyes on the world, not on the home they hoped she'd build. To them, Joe wasn't her partner. He was a step on a much larger climb. Within months, the warmth between them had faded. Meghan no longer fit within the circle she'd married into, and by the time she realized how far she'd drifted, it was already too late. Every family has a breaking point, and for the Giulianos, this was it. Protecting their son meant protecting everything they stood for: their name, their faith, and their peace. In their eyes, Meghan was never part of the family circle. She was a guest passing through, not someone meant to stay. Joe had been raised to see marriage as something sacred, a lifelong promise built on trust. But from the beginning, it was obvious that Meghan's idea of partnership was very different. Where the Giulianos prized loyalty and discretion, she seemed drawn to something brighter, the endless glow of attention. Friends close to the family remember the tension starting in whispers. First came the missed dinners, the unanswered calls, the growing list of excuses that always seemed to lead her back to Los Angeles. It wasn't long before they realized the distance wasn't just physical. Joe's parents began to sense that her drive wasn't just ambition, it was an escape plan. One family friend recalled a quiet moment when Joe's mother sighed. She doesn't want a home, she wants the world. Another described Joe's father sitting across from Meghan, trying to explain that marriage was about commitment, not cameras. She only smiled. To her, being known mattered more than being rooted. As months passed, the divide widened. Conversations turned cold, visits stopped altogether. The warmth that once filled their home was replaced by polite distance and heavy silence. The Giulianos retreated behind their traditions while Meghan drifted further into reinvention, a woman rewriting her story before it was even finished. And then came the whisper that would outlive the marriage itself. Several people close to the family claimed that only months after the Las Vegas wedding, Meghan was expecting. For most couples, that kind of news would bring joy. But for a family as private and protective as the Giulianos, it brought panic. They had built their lives on discretion, not headlines, and scandal was something they refused to allow through their doors. What happened next was never written down, only remembered in fragments. There was no fight, no shouting, just a calm understanding that felt like an agreement between ghosts. The Giulianos would take care of the child. Meghan would leave. There would be no documents, no announcements, no trail to follow. By the summer of 1995, rumors of a baby girl began to circulate. She was never photographed, never enrolled under her mother's name, and according to those close to the family, never once carried the Markle surname. People who lived near the Giulianos in Chicago remembered seeing a little girl at their family gatherings, introduced only as a relative's child. No one ever got a clear answer about who she was, and before long, she stopped being mentioned altogether. Behind closed doors, Joe stayed quietly involved in her life. Meghan, however, was gone. She left for school, for auditions, and for the career she'd always dreamed of. In doing so, she left behind a family that would never truly forgive her. What they saw as leaving wasn't just distance, it was betrayal. The Giulianos had offered her everything: belonging, faith, family, but in their eyes, she traded all of that for ambition. One of Joe's friends later summed it up bluntly. She didn't just leave Joe, she left being a mother. When the marriage ended, it didn't collapse in public view, it simply vanished. There were no messy headlines, no arguments, no courtroom drama, only an annulment quietly processed, sealed, and buried away from sight. Those close to the family said the parting came with one strict condition: silence. Meghan would go her own way, free from the Giuliano name. They, in turn, would raise the child and keep the truth locked away. It wasn't about payoff or revenge, it was about burial. An agreement to erase an entire chapter before anyone else could read it. People in Chicago whispered that money might have changed hands. Some believed the Giulianos paid to protect Meghan's image. Others thought she wanted the records hidden before starting her studies at Northwestern University. Whatever the reason, the result was the same: a spotless record, a vanished marriage, and a child who legally never existed. The Giulianos kept their promise. They never spoke publicly, yet those who knew them said they never forgot. While Meghan's life moved forward, college, acting, Hollywood, their home remained trapped in the past. The nursery stayed untouched, the memories stayed, the silence became their inheritance. To the outside world, Meghan Markle appeared to be a woman who built her life from nothing. But for the Giuliano family, she was the woman who walked away from everything. After the annulment, the home itself seemed to lose its pulse. Neighbors noticed the porch lights no longer flicked on at night. Curtains stayed drawn, and the phone line had gone dead, as if the entire household had quietly stopped breathing. One morning, the quiet street outside the Giuliano home changed forever. A moving truck pulled up, and before anyone could ask where they were going, it was gone, and so were they. Neighbors said it felt as if the entire family had evaporated overnight. Yesterday, the house had laughter and light. The next day, it stood hollow and still. No public record ever revealed their destination. But among locals, rumors spread that the Giulianos had fled the country. Some whispered Europe, others said South America, all to shield the child they had taken in from unwanted attention. Before disappearing, though, a final warning reportedly made its way through the community. Anyone who pried too deeply, asked questions, or tried to track them down would face consequences. It wasn't bitterness driving them, it was fear. Fear that the secret they had buried might one day rise again. And so, just like that, the Giulianos vanished, leaving only an empty house, a locked story, and a silence that Meghan would spend decades pretending had never existed. For nearly 30 years, that silence held. But recently, faint voices have begun to break through. Not from gossip sites or tabloids, but from people who once sat at their table. One of them reportedly said, "We didn't hide her secret to protect a lie. We did it to protect a child." A sentence that said everything without naming anyone at all. Those who had refused to speak for decades now seem ready to whisper again. Some claim the daughter, now grown, has started asking questions of her own. Others suggest family members have hinted that the truth can't stay buried much longer. Maybe that's what this is. Not revenge, not exposure, but a reckoning. A quiet acknowledgement that no secret stays in the dark forever. Papers can be sealed, people can be silenced, and timelines can be rewritten. But the truth never dies, it waits. Joe Giuliano's family may never reappear in public, and the daughter may never step into the light. Yet their absence says more than any interview ever could. After all, what kind of family abandons everything overnight? What kind of man stays silent for 30 years while the woman he once loved becomes one of the most recognizable faces in the world? Maybe the kind who's still protecting something or someone. Time has a way of unearthing what people work hardest to bury. Almost 30 years after the Giulianos vanished, faint ripples began to disturb the calm surface of Meghan's story. It started with a random upload on an obscure forum, a faded photograph from the mid-2000s, showing a young woman with unmistakable features, the same almond-shaped eyes, the same smile that once graced yearbooks from Los Angeles. The post was deleted within hours, but not before it ignited the internet's favorite pastime, speculation. Commenters claimed she looked exactly like Meghan at 20, while others swore it was the daughter the Giulianos supposedly raised in silence. The timeline fit too neatly to ignore. Soon after, a second thread appeared, linking an old alumni page from a Chicago university to a student who abruptly changed her last name and locked every account. Nothing concrete connected her to Meghan. No documents, no proof. Yet the digital trail felt uncomfortably close. Entertainment insiders began whispering that quiet inquiries were being made behind the scenes. Not lawsuits, not press statements, just silent phone calls to editors, polite requests for certain stories never to see print. Journalists who once dismissed the Giuliano tale as myth started to hesitate. When people start erasing things, one reporter tweeted, there's usually something worth finding. What unsettled observers most wasn't the rumor itself, but the timing. Just as Meghan's global projects regained attention, these ghosts of the past began to stir again. Former neighbors, anonymous users, even a retired parish priest from Chicago were suddenly being contacted by researchers. Each denied involvement, yet one phrase kept surfacing in whispers. She's asking about her real family. No one knows if that line referred to the daughter or to Meghan herself, but one truth is certain. The silence that protected this secret for decades is beginning to crack. The Giuliano name once erased is being spoken again, and every time it's whispered, the carefully sealed image Meghan built trembles just a little more. Every reinvention has a price, and for Meghan, the bill might finally be due. For years, she shaped a narrative of resilience, the actress who overcame rejection, the outsider who conquered royalty, the woman who controlled her story no matter the storm. But control only lasts until the ghosts start knocking. Behind the public calm, insiders claim there's growing unease inside her circle. Confidential memos, private security briefings, and quiet meetings with crisis management teams have reportedly become more frequent. One insider described it bluntly. They're preparing for something, not a scandal, a resurrection, meaning the Giuliano chapter might be waking up. Several independent journalists have allegedly reopened the old Chicago files, requesting documents thought long destroyed. Even retired attorneys have been approached for interviews, though every response sounds eerily rehearsed. I'm bound by confidentiality. The more people refuse to talk, the louder the mystery grows. Viewers online notice patterns, minor edits to old biographies, small corrections on official timelines, nothing explosive, but together they suggest someone is trying to tighten the seams before they split. For Meghan, the fear isn't just exposure, it's repetition. The idea that history could play its cruel mirror trick again, another family left behind, another narrative rewritten. Those who knew her during her Hollywood climb say she's always been meticulous about appearances, but lately that perfection feels defensive, almost fragile. Whispers say that a woman claiming to be connected to the Giulianos has reached out to a media outlet offering documents and memories. Whether authentic or not, the pitch has already drawn attention. If proven true, it wouldn't just reshape Meghan's image, it would reopen wounds thought long healed. And so the story circles back to where it began. A marriage erased, a child protected, a silence traded for survival. If the truth ever steps into the light, it won't arrive with fury, it'll arrive quietly, the way all ghosts do, with a knock at the door no one can ignore. Some stories never truly end. They linger, hovering in the spaces between what's known and what's hidden. This one is no different. Beneath the polished perfection of Meghan Markle's public image, beneath the royal titles and global admiration, there's a whisper that refuses to die. A ghost from her past, one that no amount of distance or reinvention could fully erase. Behind the headlines and photographs lies a chapter sealed away long before fame found her. A marriage erased from every official trace. A family that chose silence over spectacle, and a child said to have been raised far from the cameras. The Giulianos' name may have faded from public memory, but their story, the one buried under layers of denial and secrecy, still beats faintly beneath it all. People say history repeats itself, and maybe that's the quiet rhythm echoing through Meghan's life. No matter how many times she starts over, changing homes, countries, even identities, the same pattern seems to reappear. The same urge to control the narrative, to rewrite the story before anyone else can. She's traded family dinners for palace banquets, traded Chicago quiet for royal chaos, and in the process rewritten who she was meant to be. But the past never disappears. It just waits for the right moment to be heard again. Those who knew her before the fame, before the cameras, before the titles, still remember the woman she once was. They carry fragments of a story she tried to bury. The sealed records, the missing names, the silences that were paid for in loyalty, all of it still exists, just beneath the surface, waiting. Somewhere between the life she lives and the one she left behind. A heartbeat remains, soft but steady. It belongs to a daughter the world never met, to a family that vanished to protect her, and to a truth that time has not erased. The Giulianos were the first to see her clearly, the first to understand her hunger, and ultimately the first to walk away. And maybe that's the irony. For all the fame, power, and reinvention, what haunts Meghan isn't what she gained, but what she lost. The echoes of that forgotten chapter continue to follow her, not in headlines or gossip columns, but in the quiet truth whispered by those who remember. Because no matter how tightly you seal the doors, how carefully you craft the image, or how far you run, the past always finds a way to knock again.